I woke up to a notification on my phone. It was 4 in the morning, and the screen was lit up with a text from my best friend Adam. John, I'm sorry, but I had to tell you this. I saw Amanda at a restaurant on Laurel Street. She wasn't alone, and it didn't look like a business meeting. My wife Amanda. My party in life, my support. We've been together for 6 years, and I was sure I knew her better than anyone. My heart sank and my thoughts began to spin chaotically. This must be a mistake. Adam could have gotten it wrong. But why did he write it in the first place? I answered briefly, "Are you sure?" The answer came instantly. Unfortunately, yes. I wouldn't have written if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. I lay there all night staring at the ceiling. Amanda was lying next to me, sleeping peacefully, and this only increased my discomfort. Something was wrong. In the morning, when she left for work, I started to check. I opened her laptop, checked her phone, but found nothing suspicious. Maybe it was just a friendly dinner? But then why is Adam so sure? My investigation hit a dead end until I stumbled upon a spreadsheet with her personal emails. Among the hundreds of work-related messages, I found one that made me freeze. An email from an unknown man with a short message. "Tonight at 7. Same restaurant. Can't wait." My heart sank again. Could no longer be just an accident. That evening I rented a car that Amanda wouldn't recognize and parked in front of the restaurant Adam had mentioned. At exactly 7 o'clock, I saw her. She got out of the car in an elegant dress, smiling like the days we first met. But her arm was around another man's shoulder. I sat and watched them enter the restaurant, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my fingers went numb. I wasn't sure what to do next. Should I barge in? Call her out for a conversation right now? I decided to wait. They were sitting at a table by the window, laughing, talking, and then the man took her hand. My doubts were dispelled. This was not a business meeting. The next day I acted quickly. Amanda thought I knew nothing, and that was my advantage. I rented an apartment through an acquaintance and made arrangements with her partner through the same letter I found. I introduced myself as Amanda, wrote that I wanted to meet in a private place, and suggested a time. When the day came, I got everything ready. There was nothing extra in the apartment. Only a table, 2 chairs, and a package of documents that I had brought with me. She called when she was at the door. I opened the door. Her face changed instantly. First surprise, then shock, and finally anger. "What does this all mean?" she screamed. I remained calm. "Sit down," I said, pointing to a chair. "We'll talk." She started screaming, accusing me of invading her privacy, of treating her like a criminal. But I didn't react. I just put the photos from the restaurant and printouts of the correspondence on the table. Her screaming subsided. She sat in silence, looking at the evidence in front of her. Finally she whispered, "It's not what you think." I laughed, for the first time in a long time. "Amanda, that's exactly what I think. But it's not going to happen anymore. Here are the divorce papers. Sign them." She tried to justify herself, but I couldn't hear anything. Betrayed, deceived, but finally free. I left her in that apartment and never looked back. It was probably the most painful lesson of my life, but also the most important. Betrayal opens your eyes, and I will never allow myself to be blinded again. Several months passed after that meeting. My life was turned upside down, but I tried to find my balance again. Amanda signed the divorce papers, and our shared past became just a painful memory. I thought that was the end of the story, but how wrong I was. One evening, when I returned home from work, I saw a missed call from an unknown number on my phone. I was in no hurry to answer, but a few minutes later the same number called again. I decided to answer it. "John, it's Adam," said the voice on the other end. He sounded tense. "You need to know. Amanda is trying to set you up." "What?" I froze in my tracks. "What do you mean?" "She went to the police," he replied. "She said you threatened her, that you've been stalking her since the divorce." My heart sped up. This is some kind of mistake. I haven't even spoken to her since she signed the documents. "I know, but she's serious. She even hired a lawyer to file a harassment suit against you." I felt my legs giving out. It was like a nightmare. If her story had gained momentum, my life could have been ruined. The next day, I took a day off to look into the situation. First of all, I called my lawyer. Mark, my old friend and lawyer, was not happy about the news. "This is serious, John," he said. "If she has witnesses or evidence, it could be a problem. But I'm confident we can prove your innocence. We need to act quickly." Mark offered to find evidence of my innocence. First, I remembered the apartment where we met with Amanda. There were surveillance cameras there. If the recordings were still there, they could prove that I hadn't threatened her. I called the owner of the apartment and explained the situation. Luckily, he agreed to help and gave me the tapes. The video showed Amanda entering the apartment, looking calm, and me leaving after our conversation. No threats, no violence. A week later, we met in court. Amanda looked confident. Her lawyer outlined all the charges against me. But when Mark presented the camera footage, her confidence wavered. The judge watched the video and asked her, "Why isn't there anything on the tape that you describe?" Amanda began to stumble over her words. Her version of events fell apart before her eyes. The judge ruled in my favor and warned her that making false accusations could have serious consequences. After the trial, I was relieved but also disappointed. Why did she go through with it? Why couldn't she just leave me alone? Adam later told me that her new partner, the same man from the restaurant, had pushed her to do it. He was afraid that I might ruin their lives by telling them about their affair before we broke up. That was the last lesson I learned from this story. Sometimes betrayal is not only painful, but also an opportunity to see the true faces of the people next to you. After the trial, I tried to return to normal life. But Amanda didn't seem to be going to stop. One day I received a letter. It was left in my mailbox without any stamp or sender's address. There were just a few words inside. "You will pay for this." Could have been anything. A simple joke. But I knew who wrote it. Instead of fear, I felt irritation. I decided not to react and just forget about it. But when I went out to my car the next day and saw that all the tires were slashed, I realized that it was more serious than I thought. I called Mark, but he only advised me to report it to the police. "It could be an accident, but if it's part of a bigger plan, it's better to let the authorities know," he said. I did as he advised, but the feeling of unease remained. The next few weeks were relatively calm. I went back to work and tried to focus on the future. But one evening, when I was walking home, I noticed a car that kept following me. I changed my route several times, trying to figure out if it was a coincidence. But when it parked at a distance from my house and stayed there for more than an hour, there was no doubt. The next morning, I contacted a private detective. He was an old acquaintance of Mark's and had a reputation for finding the truth where they were trying to hide it. The detective agreed to investigate, and a few days later he got back to me with information. "That's a man who works for Amanda's partner," he said, showing me the photos. "It looks like they're trying to find out if you're preparing something against them." It was a blow. I could not understand why they would not leave me alone. I didn't want anything from them anymore. But now I knew I had to be careful. A few days later, I received another letter. This time it was more detailed. "We know you're trying to dig under us. It's not a good idea." The letter was accompanied by photographs of my house, obviously taken at close range. My patience was over. I decided to act. I met with Mark and the detective and we developed a plan. They knew I wouldn't give up, so I decided to collect all possible evidence of their actions and hand it over to the authorities. The detective was able to get information about Amanda's partner's business practices, which were illegal, to say the least. The last step was risky but necessary. I arranged a meeting with Amanda's partner, using a contact the detective had found in his circle. We met in a cafe, where I presented him with all the evidence I had gathered. "These are your options," I said. "Either you leave me alone or this goes to the prosecutor's office." He tried to play the victim, but eventually realized he had no choice. That same day, I didn't see the car near my house anymore. The letters stopped, and I finally felt that this story was coming to an end. A few months later, I began to build my life anew. It seemed that all the problems were behind me, but one day my peace came to an end. I received a letter. It was on the doorstep of my apartment, and signed, in a simple white envelope. When I opened it, I saw a few sentences printed on a typewriter. John, do you think you've won? You know that betrayal has consequences. The next step is mine. The handwriting wasn't Amanda's, but the style and tone hinted that it was related to her or her new partner. The letter didn't contain any more details, but I broke out in a cold sweat. Felt like a threat. I spent the next few days on my guard, looking at every detail. Nothing strange seemed to be happening, but that letter was still on my mind. I went back to Mark, my lawyer, and showed him the message. This is serious, John, he said. We have to notify the police. The police took the letter as evidence, but said that without a clear suspect, the investigation could take time. I didn't know what to do. Was it just a cheap trick to scare me? Or was something really brewing? A week later, everything became clear. One evening, on my way home, I noticed that a car was following me. At first I thought it was just a coincidence, but the car followed me all the way home. I stopped, got out of the car, and looked at them. The driver, a man in a hood, turned around and drove away. The next day I decided to install surveillance cameras around the house. I wasn't going to play by their rules. If someone wants to scare me, they have the wrong address. The next event happened later. One morning I found the windows in my car broken, and someone had left an inscription on the hood. You can't escape. This time I was sure it was no accident. I called the police, provided the footage from the cameras, and started actively seeking protection. Mark suggested hiring a private detective to find out who was behind it. After several weeks of investigation, the detective got on the trail. It turned out that not only Amanda's new partner, but also several of his friends were behind all these actions. They were working together, trying to intimidate me, and possibly get me involved in something more serious. Eventually, their plan was revealed. The evidence collected allowed us to bring these people to justice, including Amanda's partner. They were forced to answer to the law for harassment and threats. Amanda did not appear in my life after that. She stayed on the side of her partner, although I was not surprised. Her choice and its consequences, and I finally felt that I could move on. It was a long road, but I came out of it stronger. A few more months passed, and life began to return to its normal rhythm. After the arrest of Amanda's partner and his friends, I finally felt some stability. But somewhere deep down, I realized that this calm could be deceptive. People who are capable of such actions don't just stop. One evening, when I returned home, I noticed that the door to my apartment was slightly ajar. My heart beat faster. I was sure I had closed it when I left. I pulled out my phone and dialed the police number, but did not go inside, waiting for the police to arrive. When the police arrived, they searched the apartment. At first glance, everything seemed to be in its place, but then I noticed that some important documents related to the court case were missing. Couldn't have been an accident. Someone was trying to find a way to discredit me or use these documents against me. I contacted Mark and the detective again, telling them about the situation. We found out that these documents could possibly be key to someone from Amanda's past or her partner. It was an attempt not only to interfere in my life again, but also to block my ability to defend myself. Mark recommended that I temporarily move to another city to be safe. I reluctantly agreed. It seemed unfair to leave my life, my home, my friends, but my peace of mind was more important. In the new city, I started from scratch. I worked remotely, tried to avoid any publicity, and stayed away from social media. The detective continued to work on the case, and a few weeks later we got an important breakthrough. The person who broke into my apartment left behind a trail that led us to one of my former business partners. This man, George, had his own motivation. When I left the company because of Amanda's infidelity, I stopped funding one of his projects. It was a disaster for him, and it seems he decided to use the situation to take revenge on me. We arranged a meeting with George through our detective. He came in confident of his impunity, but we already had all the evidence we needed to implicate him. His expression changed when we showed him the surveillance photos and phone records. You have two options, Mark said. You cooperate with the police and confess, or we take all this evidence straight to court. George was forced to choose the former. He ratted out everyone involved in planning the attacks, including those working for Amanda's partner. It was the final blow to their entire network. A few months after that, I finally returned home. My enemies were either behind bars or had lost any power to continue persecuting me. But these events changed me forever. I became more cautious, less trusting, and ready to defend myself at all costs. Life didn't return to the way it was before, but I finally felt free. Now I could look forward, knowing that I had left the past behind. And this time, I was ready for whatever might lie ahead. After all the events I had experienced, I decided to leave the past behind. The city in which Amanda and I lived no longer evoked anything but heavy memories. So I decided to move. It was spontaneous. I chose a small town in another state that I knew very little about. I just wanted to start from scratch. I found a cozy house on the outskirts. From here I could see the forest and a small river. My new neighbors were friendly, but not too interested in my life, which suited me very well. My work remained remote, and I completely immersed myself in it, trying to regain my peace of mind. My new routine was simple. In the mornings, I ran along the trails in the forest, worked during the day, and in the evenings I read books I had long wanted to finish. But one day everything changed. In a coffee shop where I went out of habit after a run, I met Mia. She was sitting at a neighboring table, flipping through some papers. Her long, dark hair fell over her shoulders, and she looked like a person deep in thought. Our conversation started by chance. I noticed that she was looking for a pen and held out mine. "Thank you," she said, smiling. Her smile was so sincere that for the first time in a long time I felt something like warmth. We started talking. It turned out that she was a local, worked as a journalist, and liked to spend time in the coffee shop because she found inspiration there. She was interested in people's stories, and she immediately noticed that I was not from here. "Are you new?" she asked. "You could say that," I replied, trying not to reveal too much. But Mia was persistent. From that day on, we started seeing each other often. At first by chance, and then we made special arrangements to meet. She seemed to have the gift of penetrating the wall I had built around me. Her sincerity and curiosity about life were infectious. One evening, when we were walking along the river, she asked me, "Why did you move here?" I stopped, trying to collect my thoughts. She noticed my hesitation. "You don't have to answer," she quickly added. But I decided to tell her the truth. I told her about Amanda, about the divorce, about the chaos that had been left behind. Mia listened attentively, not interrupting. When I was done, she said only one thing: "You made the right choice in moving here." Over time, our relationship became closer. Mia helped me find a new meaning in life. She showed me that the past does not have to determine our future. Together with her, I began to discover the world anew. Simple joys like walking, talking over a cup of coffee, and planning for the future. One day she confessed that she had experienced betrayal herself. Her previous partner had been cheating on her for years, but she was able to break free of this cycle of lies. Her strength and ability to move on inspired me. We decided to go on a trip together to leave all our old memories behind. A new city, new people, new opportunities. It was the beginning of a completely different life, and this time I was ready for any challenges that might lie ahead. The months I spent with Mia were like a breath of fresh air. She was able not only to bring me back to life, but also to make me feel that I was not alone. The journey we had planned was the first big step into a new phase of our lives. We traveled by car to the coast, where we knew no one, and every day promised something new. Mia found it easy to connect with strangers, and I learned to open up to people, even though it was hard. Our nights were spent on the beaches around the campfire, where we talked about the future and left behind what no longer mattered. One evening, as we sat under the starry sky, Mia said, "I think you've found your place, but do you know what you want to do next?" Her words made me think. I had always lived in the shadow of what happened to Amanda. Even when I broke out of it, there was still a void that I couldn't fill. "I want to start something new, something of my own," I answered. "Maybe a small business, something simple but real." Mia smiled, and I realized that she would support any decision I made. This feeling was priceless. When I returned from my trip, I started planning to open my own cafe. It was something I had always wanted to do but never dared to try. Mia immediately offered to help. She had a lot of ideas about how to make the place cozy and attractive to people. We found a small building in the center of our town. It was old, with peeling walls, but it had potential. Together, we started renovating it, choosing furniture, and coming up with a menu. Mia even wrote a small blog about our process, and over time, people started asking when we would open. The opening day was special. All our neighbors, Mia's friends, and even a few people who read her blog came. The place was filled with laughter, conversation, and the aroma of fresh coffee. I stood behind the counter, watching it all, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like life had finally found its balance. Mia raised a toast with a cup of coffee. Here's to new beginnings and to finally leaving the past where it belongs behind. I smiled and thought, maybe sometimes fate takes away what we thought was important just to give us something better. And although I will never be able to forget what happened before, I realized that now I have something real. And it was worth all the trials I went through. A few months have passed since we opened our cafe, and every day has been special in its own way. The locals quickly became our regular customers, and the cafe became a place where people could not only drink coffee, but also discuss the news, laugh, or just feel the warmth of a homey atmosphere. Mia started promoting the cafe on social media. Her blog was now dedicated not only to the opening process, but also to our everyday stories. She took pictures of the delicious dishes we added to the menu and recorded short conversations with customers. Her energy was inspiring, and I could see her finding herself in all of this. One day, a woman came into the cafe whom I didn't even recognize at first. She looked completely different from what I remembered. It was Amanda. She stood at the entrance, looking around the place a little nervously. Mia was behind the counter and didn't seem to have a clue who the woman was. I went out to meet her. "Hello, Amanda. What are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked confused, but quickly composed herself. "John, I just wanted to see how you were doing. I heard you opened a cafe, and I thought it was great." I could feel the memories rising, but I didn't let them take over. "Thank you. We've made ourselves comfortable here," I said, distancing myself a bit. Amanda looked down and was silent for a while. Then she added, "I know it's over between us, and I'm not looking to reconnect, but I want to apologize for everything." These words took me by surprise. I didn't expect her to admit her mistakes. Her apology was sincere, and although the pain of her betrayal was still somewhere deep inside, I felt that I could let go of that part of the past. "I accept your apology," I replied, looking her straight in the eye. "But I have a new life now, and I don't want to go back to the way things were." She nodded and left the cafe without another word. Mia, who had been watching us from a distance, came over after Amanda left. "Who is this?" she asked, holding a cup of coffee. "That was Amanda. She came to apologize," I answered briefly. Mia put her hand on my shoulder. "How are you?" "I'm fine," I said, smiling, and for the first time in a long time it was true. From that day on, I realized that the past no longer held me in its grip. The cafe was thriving, my relationship with Mia was getting stronger, and I saw a bright future ahead of me. The past was a part of me, but it no longer defined my life. As time passed, our cafe became an integral part of the life of the small town. Regular customers came not only for coffee, but also for conversations, news, and smiles. Mia, as always, radiated energy, and I learned to enjoy the simple things. But life always finds a way to add the unexpected. One morning, a woman in her 40s, elegantly dressed and with a stern expression, came to us. She did not look like our usual customers. She walked up to the counter where Mia was standing and introduced herself. "My name is Alice. I'm looking for John." Mia nodded in my direction, and the woman confidently walked over to my table. I stood up, feeling anxiety rising in my chest. "You don't know me, but I know Amanda," she said, sitting down across from me uninvited. I tensed up. Amanda's name had come back into my life when I least expected it. "What can I do for you?" I asked, trying to keep my cool. Alice looked at me coldly. "I'm a lawyer. Amanda left me something that concerns you. It might change your mind about what happened." My mind was spinning with questions, but I didn't let on. "What is it?" She opened her briefcase and took out several documents, placing them on the table. "Amanda contacted me before you two finally broke up. It's about the finances she was running with you. I need you to review it." I took the documents, trying to hide the trembling of my hands. It was hard to read. The text was legal and complicated. But one detail caught my attention. The records indicated that part of the funds from our joint accounts had gone to some large transfers that I knew nothing about. "What does that mean?" I asked, looking at Alice. "It means that Amanda had reasons to hide certain activities from you. If you want to know more, you'll need to cooperate with me." Mia, who had been keeping her distance the whole time, came over when Alice left. "What was that?" "Another greeting from the past," I said, wondering what to do next. After meeting Alice, I couldn't calm down. The documents she left behind contained too many questions and not a single answer. Why did Amanda hide these transfers? What did she spend such large sums on? And most importantly, why did this come to light now? Mia, as always, tried to support me, but I could see that she was also worried about the situation. We sat down together over the documents, trying to find some clues. "There's a contact number for the bank manager here," Mia said, pointing to one of the documents. "Maybe he can explain where these transactions came from." I decided not to delay and called. The manager, a man with a pleasant voice, agreed to meet with me the next day. The next morning I went to the bank branch, where the manager was waiting for me. He looked professional but reserved. "Mr. John, I understand that you have questions about these accounts," he said as he looked over the documents I had brought. "However, I must warn you that some of this information may be confidential. I just want to know why these transfers were made without my knowledge," I replied. The manager nodded and opened the computer. "Give me a minute." After a few minutes of typing and viewing files, he stopped. "These transfers were made to an account that we believe belongs to a private company. Does the name Orion Consulting mean anything to you?" I shook my head. The name didn't mean anything to me. "This company is registered in another state," he continued. "And it's interesting that most of the transfers occurred during the period when you were busy with the divorce process." My mind went blank. Amanda had used our joint funds to finance something behind my back. But what exactly? After leaving the bank, I called Alice. She answered almost immediately. "We have to talk," I said. "I found information about the company to which the transfers were going. Orion Consulting. What do you know about it?" Alice was silent for a while, and then answered, "That might be part of why Amanda came to me, but I think you'd better see something in person. Meet me at my office today at 4 o'clock. At 4, I went to her office, where she was waiting with new documents. "I checked out this company," she said, pulling out a folder. "Orion Consulting is not just a business. It's an offshore structure used to hide transactions. And it seems Amanda was one of the key people who had access to these accounts." "Are you saying that she was involved in fraud?" I asked. Alice nodded. "And not only that. I suspect she used the money to buy out her stake in another business. But there's not enough paperwork to confirm it yet." My heart sank. This discovery put everything in a new light. But if it was true, what should I do now? After meeting with Alice, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a huge cliff. The fact that Amanda could have been involved in fraudulent schemes turned my perception of her actions and our shared past upside down. But it also meant that I could be involved in a situation that went far beyond a personal conflict. I went home, gathered all the documents I had, and started to put together a picture of what had happened. Orion Consulting looked like a front company, but who really owned it? And was Amanda just a pawn in this game, or did she know more than she appeared to? The next day I met with Alice again. She brought new materials that her team had been able to obtain through legal channels. Among them were copies of contracts that bore the signatures of Amanda and several other people presumably associated with Orion Consulting. This is just the tip of the iceberg, Alice said, spreading the documents on the table. This company was used to transfer large amounts of money to offshore accounts. We also found links to several well-known businessmen who are already under investigation. I was silent, looking at the papers. I was overwhelmed with feelings, anger, disappointment, but also a desire to find out the truth to the end. "What do you propose to do?" I finally asked. Alice looked at me intently. "We can hand over these materials to law enforcement. But that means Amanda will be under serious pressure. Are you ready for that?" I thought about it. Despite all the resentment, I didn't want to destroy her life. But if she was really involved in something illegal, then responsibility for it had to be inevitable. "Pass it on," I finally said. "But I want to know what happens next." The following weeks were intense. Alice cooperated with law enforcement, providing them with all the materials she had collected. The investigation moved quickly. I received regular updates that Amanda and her alleged accomplices were now being treated as key figures in a major financial fraud case. However, one evening I received an unexpected call. It was Amanda. "John." Her voice sounded anxious. "I need to talk to you. It's important." "I don't think we have anything to talk about," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "Please," she insisted. "I know you've already figured it out, but there are things you don't know. This could affect not only me, but you as well." Her words made me think. What did she mean? And was it worth listening to her at all? After meeting with Alice, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a huge cliff. The fact that Amanda could have been involved in fraudulent schemes turned my perception of her actions and our shared past upside down. But it also meant that I could be involved in a situation that went far beyond a personal conflict. I went home, gathered all the documents I had, and started to put together a picture of what had happened. Orion Consulting looked like a front company, but who really owned it? And was Amanda just a pawn in this game, or did she know more than she appeared to? The next day I met with Alice again. She brought new materials that her team had been able to obtain through legal channels. Among them were copies of contracts that bore the signatures of Amanda and several other people presumably associated with Orion Consulting. "This is just the tip of the iceberg," Alice said, spreading the documents on the table. This company was used to transfer large amounts of money to offshore accounts. We also found links to several well-known businessmen who are already under investigation. I was silent, looking at the papers. I was overwhelmed with feelings, anger, disappointment, but also a desire to find out the truth to the end. "What do you propose to do?" I finally asked. Alice looked at me intently. "We can hand over these materials to law enforcement. But that means Amanda will be under serious pressure. Are you ready for that?" I thought about it. Despite all the resentment, I didn't want to destroy her life. But if she was really involved in something illegal, then responsibility for it had to be inevitable. "Pass it on," I finally said. "But I want to know what happens next." The following weeks were intense. Alice cooperated with law enforcement, providing them with all the materials she had collected. The investigation moved quickly. I received regular updates that Amanda and her alleged accomplices were now being treated as key figures in a major financial fraud case. However, one evening I received an unexpected call. It was Amanda. "John." Her voice sounded anxious. "I need to talk to you. It's important." "I don't think we have anything to talk about," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "Please," she insisted. "I know you've already figured it out, but there are things you don't know. This could affect not only me, but you as well." Her words made me think. What did she mean? And was it worth listening to her at all? I agreed to meet with Amanda. We agreed to meet in a quiet cafe outside the city to avoid unnecessary witnesses. I came early, trying to calm my thoughts. Her words that this was about me were haunting me. Amanda showed up on time. She looked exhausted, like someone who had experienced sleepless nights. We sat down at a table in the corner, away from prying eyes. "Thank you for coming," she said, avoiding my gaze. "Cut to the chase," I replied shortly. "What do you want to tell me?" Amanda sighed and finally looked at me. This all started long before our divorce. Orion Consulting was a project I invested in because I was promised a huge profit. But I didn't know what was behind it. She fell silent, as if afraid of saying something unnecessary. Who is behind this? I insisted. Ryan, she answered quietly. Ryan was a coworker of hers whom I knew almost nothing about. He convinced me it was a safe investment, she continued. But over time, I realized that he was using me as a front. He was transferring money through my accounts to hide it from the tax authorities. Why didn't you say anything to me? I asked, feeling anger boiling inside me. I was afraid. Ryan warned me that if I told anyone, I could end up in jail with him. And then our conflict started, and I thought it was better to keep it a secret. Do you realize what you've gotten us both into? I said sharply. Now this investigation could affect me, even if I didn't know anything. Amanda nodded, lowering her eyes. That's why I wanted to talk to you. I have documents that can prove you had nothing to do with it, but they need to be given to the right people. She took a folder out of her bag and put it on the table. This is everything I could gather. It's risky, but if you give this to your lawyers or law enforcement, it will help clear your name. I took the folder without taking my eyes off her. And you? What will happen to you? I'm ready to take responsibility for my actions, she replied quietly. But I want you to be safe. When I got home, I looked through the documents. They contained correspondence between Amanda and Ryan, financial reports, and transfer records. This was strong evidence that she had acted under his pressure. I passed everything on to Alice, who confirmed that these materials could be key to the case. The investigation continued, and eventually Ryan became the main target of the investigation. Amanda testified that she helped to uncover his scheme, but she also had to answer for her part. She was found guilty of financial negligence, but her cooperation with the investigation was taken into account and she was given a suspended sentence. I watched this process from a distance. I no longer had any desire to return to Amanda or the life we once had, but I felt that it had untied the last knot that kept me tied to the past. Now I could focus on the future without looking back. After the investigation was completed, I felt relieved, but also a certain emptiness. The last months were filled with tension, surprises, and a constant struggle to control the situation. Now that it was over, it seemed that life had fallen into silence. Amanda no longer tried to get in touch. Her probation forced her to stay away from any risks. Ryan was behind bars and his scheme was destroyed. But I realized that the shadows of all this would fall on my life for a long time. Mia supported me throughout this period. She was the person who helped me to keep my feet on the ground. Together we decided it was time to focus on the future. We developed a plan to expand our cafe, adding a new menu and organizing events for the local community. One morning, while I was doing the bills, a man in a strict suit knocked on the door of the cafe. He looked like a government official, and I was immediately wary. "Are you John?" he asked. "Yes, it's me. How can I help you?" "My name is Mark Henderson. I'm an investigator with the Financial Crimes Unit. We have discovered something new in the Orion Consulting case and would like to discuss it with you." I invited him inside, feeling the tension starting to build again. Mia joined us, sitting next to me at the table. "We have found additional evidence that Ryan was not working alone. There were influential people involved in this scheme, and your testimony and the documents you provided were key to our investigation. But there is one more thing. We found that your data could have been used to cover up some of the transactions. It's not an accusation, but we want your help to find out." My anxiety grew. "What do you mean?" Mark opened the folder, pulling out several documents. "These transactions were made using your name and signature. We suspect this may have been falsified by Ryan or one of his associates. But to confirm, we need your permission to access additional records." I looked at the documents. These were large amounts that I had never seen in my own accounts. Mia put her hand on my shoulder, trying to calm me down. "Of course, I am ready to cooperate. If it will help prove the truth, I will do everything in my power," I replied. The next few weeks saw another wave of investigations. investigators found evidence that my name had indeed been used to cover several transactions. This explained why I had become a target of interest from the very beginning. But now, with the new evidence, I could fully exonerate myself. Mark kept me informed every step of the way. Your case has become part of a larger case that involves not only financial fraud but also political intrigue. It goes beyond our usual scope. I didn't know whether I was happy about it or not. On the one hand, it meant that I was part of something bigger than I had ever imagined. On the other hand, I just wanted to leave it all behind and get back to normal. Mia and I decided not to wait for the case to be over to move on. We started planning a new trip, wanting to get away from all the chaos. But deep down, I knew that this story was not over yet, and its consequences could haunt me for a long time. After talking to Mark, I couldn't shake the feeling that this story was far from over. The investigators were revealing more and more details, and I realized that I was involved in a game that was much bigger than my life. Mia suggested that we take a break from all the tension. Maybe a little traveling will help you clear your head, she said. I agreed, but even as I planned our vacation, I felt like my thoughts were tied to the Orion Consulting business. One evening I received an unexpected call. An unfamiliar name came up on the screen. Gregory Wilson. Mr. John, this is Gregory Wilson. I used to work for Orion Consulting. We need to talk. My hand froze on the phone. I didn't know what to say. In the end, I said briefly, "Okay, when and where?" We agreed to meet the next day at a hotel nearby. Mia immediately noticed that I was excited. "Are you sure it's safe?" she asked. "I have to find out what he knows," I replied. At the meeting, Gregory looked nervous. He looked around several times before sitting down at the table. "I know you were involved in this case, but there are things you should know if you want to protect yourself," he began. Gregory said that Orion Consulting was only part of a much larger scheme that involved money laundering and influencing political decisions through shell companies. He claimed that Ryan was only the executor, while the real leaders remained in the shadows. "They used your name because they knew you would be the perfect cover. A man with no criminal record who didn't even know he was involved," Gregory said. These words were like a punch in the face. I realized that I had become part of the scheme not because I had done anything wrong, but because I was the perfect target. "Why did you decide to tell me this?" I asked. "Because they are now looking for the guilty, and if you're not ready, you may find yourself among them," he replied. Gregory left me with a stack of documents that he said could help me make sense of this web. At home, I opened the documents. They had details about accounts, transactions, and even the names of the people behind it. Mia sat next to me, reading along with me. "It's more than we thought," she said. "But what are you going to do next?" "We have to pass this on to Mark and the investigators. If it's true, it could be the key to solving everything." Mia nodded, but I could see the fear in her eyes. And this time I couldn't reassure her. I was afraid myself that we were now part of something that could destroy our lives. The Orion Consulting investigation was nearing completion. After the documents were handed over to Gregory, investigators were able to confirm key details of the scheme, which involved multimillion-dollar transactions, political corruption, and a network of shell companies. The main organizers were arrested and their names made headlines. Mark informed me that my role in the investigation was over. "You did everything you could, John. Your name is cleared and no one else is accusing you. Now you can move on." These words brought me a relief that I had not felt for a very long time. Justice had been done, and I was no longer a hostage to the past. Mia suggested we celebrate this event. We decided to organize a small celebration in our cafe for our friends and regular customers. In the evening, when the place was filled with laughter and warmth, I realized how much this new chapter in my life meant to me. During the toast, Mia raised her glass and said, "This is a celebration not only for John, but for all of us who believe that even in the darkest of times, there is light. Thank you for being there for me." I looked at her and felt grateful that she remained my support in the most difficult moments. The next day, Mia and I set off on the trip we had been planning for so long. It was a time of rest and rethinking everything that had happened. We traveled through small towns, enjoyed nature, and rediscovered the joy in simple things. At one of the rest stops, sitting by the lake, Mia asked, "What's next, John? Have you thought about what you want to do?" I smiled. "I want to expand the cafe, make it a place where people feel at home, and maybe start a new project, something that will help others find support in difficult times." She nodded, her eyes shining with support. "You will do it. I believe in you." When we returned home, we started working on new ideas. The cafe flourished, and we became not just a business, but a real community center. I knew that the path was not easy, but now I felt that everything was not in vain. My past was no longer holding me back, and for the first time in a long time, I looked to the future with hope. After the investigation and the celebration, life in the cafe began to take on a calm but meaningful rhythm. Our cafe became popular not only with locals, but also with people from other cities who came to experience the warm atmosphere and taste our unique dishes. Mia was at the center of this success. Her creativity and tireless energy turned our place into a real community center. One morning, when I was standing at the bar looking over the orders, an elderly man approached me. He looked like a typical traveler, wearing a hat and carrying a large backpack. "The coffee here is great," he said, smiling. "Are you the owner?" "Yes, this is my wife and I's cafe," I replied, shaking his hand. "This place has a special atmosphere," he continued. "It reminds me that even in the darkest of times, there are corners where people can find peace." His words made me think. Perhaps what Mia and I have created is not just a business. It has become something more, a symbol of renewal and new beginnings. Meanwhile, Mia was working on a new project. She decided to organize a series of events at the cafe to support people going through difficult life moments. We invited psychologists, coaches, and just strong people to share their stories of overcoming difficulties. The first evening was a great success. People stayed until late in the evening, shared their experiences, and thanked us for the opportunity to find support. Once after such an event, I sat at the table with Mia, watching our guests reluctantly leave. "This is more than a cafe, isn't it?" she said, holding my hand. Yes, it has become a place where people can feel that they are not alone," I replied. A few months later, we decided to expand our project. Together with the team, we opened a new space next to the cafe, a small center where people could find resources for support and training. Workshops, meetings, and therapy sessions were held there. It was another step in our lives that allowed us to leave behind all the dark pages of the past. I felt that I had finally achieved peace. My life had taken on a meaning I could never have imagined. And although the scars of the past remained, they no longer defined me. After the successful opening of a new space next to our cafe, life began to take on a new meaning. The center became a place where everyone could find support, regardless of their life path. Mia and I worked together to organize workshops, lectures, and theme nights. Each event was imbued with an atmosphere of warmth and trust. One morning, when I was looking through the list of planned events, Mia came up to me. She had a brochure in her hands, which she seemed to be holding with special trepidation. "I want to share an idea," she said, sitting down next to me. "What if we created a program for young people who feel lost? We could help them find their calling or just feel like they have the power to move forward." I thought about it. It was more than just a project. It could become a real charitable movement that changes lives. "That's great, Mia, but you know it will require a lot of resources and effort," I said. "I know, but I feel it's important. We can start small and see how it goes," she replied, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. We decided to start with a series of meetings for young people. We called them My Way. Only a few people came to the first meeting, but each of them stayed afterwards to thank us for the opportunity to share their stories. It was a sign that we were on the right track. Over time, My Way gained popularity. Young people came not only from our town, but also from other places. We invited professionals to help them discover their talents and create mini projects that became part of their big dreams. One evening, after another meeting, I was sitting in our cafe watching Mia chatting with one of the participants. Her ability to listen and inspire people has always fascinated me. She's changing lives, isn't she? A voice suddenly said behind me. I turned around and saw a man who had been to our events several times. His name was Anthony. Yes, and she changed mine too, I replied, smiling. Anthony nodded. Your meetings helped me find meaning after I lost my job. Now I'm doing what I've always wanted to do. I just wanted to say thank you. These words reminded me why we started this journey. Not for success or recognition, but for the sake of people who found something real and inspiring in our place. Life went on, and every day brought new challenges and opportunities. But now I knew that Mia and I had created something meaningful. Something that would last even after we were gone. A year after Mia and I started the My Way program, our project has grown into something bigger than we could have imagined. The young people who once came for inspiration have now become mentors for new participants. The center near our cafe has become a center where people of all ages found answers to their questions and felt part of something meaningful. One day I received a letter. There was no return address on the envelope, but the writing style was familiar. Inside I found a short message. John, I see how far you have come. Your achievements inspire even people like me. Thank you for setting an example. Keep up the good work. Amanda. I sat for a long time holding this letter. The past was coming back in unexpected ways. But now I didn't feel anger or pain. It was just another reminder of the path I had traveled. We launched a new project in the center. This time we worked with local entrepreneurs who wanted to develop their ideas. We called it the Dream Workshop. The idea was to create an environment where people could learn, share experiences, and support each other. Mia took on the role of curator, organizing meetings with successful entrepreneurs and masterclasses. Her energy and enthusiasm inspired everyone around her. I worked on the logistics and finances, making sure that each participant got the most out of their development. One evening, when we stayed at the center after another session, Mia picked up her coffee cup and said, John, have you noticed how all this has changed us? I smiled. Yes, and I think it changed not only us, but our whole environment. She looked thoughtfully out the window. You know, I never thought I would be able to be a part of something so big. It's like a dream come true. I put my hand on her shoulder. This is your dream too, Mia, and your work has made it possible. The Dream Workshop began to attract the attention of not only local residents but also organizations from other cities. We were offered cooperation, new projects, and even invited to speak at conferences. We realized that our work was becoming an example for others. But for me, the biggest achievement was seeing people find their place in the world every day. The feeling that we helped create this environment was incomparable. Life went on, and although there were new challenges ahead, I knew that together with Mia we would overcome them. Our path had not been easy, but now it was filled with meaning and dreams that we were ready to realize. After the success of the Dream Workshop, Mia and I realized that it was time to take it one step further. Our center and cafe have become more than just a place for community. They have become a platform for change. We decided to open a new space that would cover more needs. Not only for education or inspiration, but also for project implementation. The new project was called the Incubator of Opportunities. It was supposed to be a space for people who wanted to create, experiment, and bring ideas to life. We rented an old warehouse not far from the city center and started transforming it. The walls, which had been gray bricks until recently, were now alive with bright drawings that reflected the dreams of our participants. The opening of the new space brought together not only our regular customers but also new faces. The energy of expectation was palpable in the air. People were sharing their ideas, dreaming of their own projects, and looking for support. Mia gave a short speech. This space is for everyone who is ready to try something new. It's a place where your ideas can turn into reality. We are here to help you take the first step. The first participants of the incubator were a group of young designers who dreamed of creating their own clothing line and engineers who worked on environmental projects. We provided them with resources, contacts, and space to work. Every day I saw them moving forward, turning their ideas into something real. One of the projects that impressed us the most was related to the restoration of local nature. A group of enthusiasts created a plan to clean up a polluted river, involving not only volunteers but also local businesses. This was an example of how one idea can unite a community. For me personally, this new stage was not only a professional challenge, but also an internal growth. Each success story, each new project inspired me to dream even bigger. But the greatest achievement was the feeling that Mia and I had become part of something much bigger than ourselves. One evening, as we sat on the roof of our new space, looking out at the city lights, Mia said, "You know, John, I used to be afraid to even dream about this life, and now it's ours." I looked at her and answered, "And this is just the beginning." The incubator of opportunities was not just a project. It became our common future, which we created together with people who believed in their dreams. Every day brought new challenges and victories, and this was what filled our lives with meaning. After several years of successful operation of our incubator of opportunities, we began to notice how our influence was expanding far beyond the city. People from different parts of the country came to participate in our programs or to see how we work. This inspired us to a new stage of development. Mia suggested creating a mobile format for our project. The idea was to organize temporary incubators in cities that did not have access to such resources. We started by developing a plan. We rented a van, filled it with equipment and materials for workshops and lectures. The first trip was to a small town in the south. We worked there for 2 weeks, teaching local youth the basics of entrepreneurship, environmental thinking, and creativity. At the end of the program, we organized an exhibition where the participants could present their projects. The feedback was overwhelming, and it gave us confidence that we were on the right track. One of the biggest projects that emerged from the mobile incubator was the restoration of a local historic building. The program participants attracted sponsors, organized a charity auction, and began restoration work. Seeing how their initiative was changing the community, I felt proud that Mia and I were able to inspire these people. When we returned home after another trip, we decided to focus on developing a network of such mobile projects. Mia suggested inviting volunteers from among those who had already completed our programs to become part of the team. It was a logical step, as many of our former participants wanted to give back and help others. As we were preparing to launch the second phase of the mobile incubator, I received an unexpected offer. One of the international organizations working to support youth entrepreneurship invited us to speak at their conference. It was a huge step for us because our experience could now inspire people on a global scale. Mia and I stood on stage in front of hundreds of people. She began her speech with a story about how we started with a small cafe that became a place of inspiration for the community. I ended by talking about our journey and how every small action can be a catalyst for big change. When we finished, the audience burst into applause. That was the moment when I realized that everything we had gone through was worth it. We didn't just build a business or a center, we created a movement that changed people's lives. After the conference, we returned home full of new ideas and plans. Our lives had been busy, but now we knew that every day brought not just challenges but opportunities. Although there was still a lot of work to be done, we felt ready for whatever the future held. A few years after Mia and I started the incubator of opportunities and mobile projects, our lives gained the stability we had been looking for. We were traveling, helping new communities, but at the same time we had time for ourselves. Our cafe was still the heart of everything we had created, and every week it brought warm meetings with familiar and new people. One day, Mia came up with an idea that became our last big project. "John, what if we created a platform for sharing experiences, so that each community can learn from each other, even if we can't physically be there?" The idea was simple but brilliant. We created an online platform where people from different regions could share their success stories, projects, and challenges. Everyone who had completed our program could talk about their achievements and give advice to those who were just starting out. It became a bridge between communities that had not even known about each other before. Our last big opening took place in our hometown. It was a moment when all of our friends, partners, former program participants, and family came together to celebrate the success of our movement. We set up a big screen to show how our work has impacted the lives of people around the world. Each story on the screen was proof that small actions can have a huge impact. Mia held my hand as we stood on stage in front of all these people. She looked at me and said, "John, it was the best decision to start over. And I'm glad we did it together." I answered, looking into her shining eyes, "All of this would not have been possible without you. And I know that there are many more incredible things to come." After the party was over, we sat in our cafe, watching the stage lights go out. People began to leave, but I felt that something indescribable remained, a sense of completion and peace. Mia picked up her coffee cup and said, "What do you think will happen next?" I smiled and answered, "This may be the end of one story, but it is the beginning of a new one, and I'm ready